Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Like a shining star in the vastness of space, light can be found in any darkness. Can there also be a spark of goodness within every evil? Is it possible that finding it can revolutionize our lives? Mission Evolution AM radio show is coming to you around the world on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Christopher Phillips is joining us this hour to discuss finding light in the darkness. Christopher, the author of Soul of Goodness, dedicates his life to promoting civil disclosures that bring diverse people together. Dr. Phillips has been New York Fellow at Harvard University's Edmond J. Safra Center for Ethics, was a 2012 recipient of the Distinguished American Leadership Award, and founded the nonprofit Democracy. His website, ChristopherPhillips.com. Christopher, thanks for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Hi, Gwilda. It's my pleasure.
So I understand that you're of Greek heritage. How has your heritage and upbringing influenced your philosophical pursuits and writings?
I would say, how has it not influenced? It's influenced everything. Sometimes it lies kind of dormant inside of me for a really long time. And then the teachings of my yaya, my Greek grandmother, kind of emerge at times when I'm at a crossroads, my society's at a crossroads, typically one and the same time. And, she taught me not so much spirituality, but about spirits and forces and how to harness certain kinds of spirits that can allow us to deal with even the most egregious losses and setbacks and betrayals in ways that can enable us better to push back against the encroaching darknesses in our times, individually and collectively.
So are these spirits that you're talking about similar to, say, in Catholicism, we have the spirit of Mary, the Native Americans have the spirit of the wind, that sort of thing?
Well, it can be. It could be amalgam of those things. I am endlessly enlightened, for instance, by Native American knowledges, and it's been always such a joy for me to have dialogues with Native Americans. But she sort of taught me about what we would call Socratic spirits. Now, even though I have 3 masters and a PhD, you'll not hear about these Socratic spirits in any hallowed hall of academia. And it's probably why I was rejected at most PhD programs for philosophy. But for me, Socratic spirits are virtue isn't just a thing. It's not just an entity. Arete, all around human excellence, isn't just a thing or an entity. But it's a spirit within us that needs to be harnessed and cultivated, combined with a social conscience, so that we act in the world in ways in which we recognize that we best elevate ourselves by also striving to elevate others. And we do it with both a forward and backward and present looking lens at the one and the same time. I carry my yaya, I carry my late father on my shoulders. It's not heavy, it's ethereal. And they guide me and direct me as I continue to redouble my efforts in this time and climb of great polarization to do everything I can and indeed must to make sure that our times, if they are darkening, that we strive to serve as both candles and lights, because we, the people, can do a whole lot. And we got to quit pointing the fingers at others and look at ourselves and say, well, what can we do? And for me, that is a big part of that is harnessing and channeling spirits and forces that eudaimonia for me is a Greek term that typically is translated as happiness, but that gives it short shrift. It's joy. It's about being sort of a conductor of a symphony of spirits and working towards creating a future that we would want for children, young people, not just in our little patch of earth, not just for my 2 daughters, but children will never meet on the other side of the globe. and not just for the next generation, but for 500 generations from hence, to have that sense of long-term vision that I know our ancestors would want. And so it's very important that I check in with them and carry them and have them imbued within me in everything I do.
You mentioned that the times are darkening. Would you go into that a little bit, please?
Well, I think that when I started Socrates Cafe in 1996, it was just before the Clinton impeachment proceedings, and there was great polarization. And I sometimes say, and not glibly, that I'm almost nostalgic for that kind of polarization because we've even become more deeply divided. Friends, families, former classmates, they unfriend each other on Facebook, they quit speaking to each other. And I think that there's a number of efforts among people who should know better to deliberately build walls of division instead of intentionally trying to create bridges of understanding. I see absolutely nothing wrong, and I celebrate differences, a plurality of perspectives. And so many of us now are, based on my travels, on my dialogues, and my experiences, are digging in their heels, not just refusing to put themselves in other people's shoes and seeing why other people come and think so differently, but really not listening. If when we close off our ears, we close off our hearts.
Yeah,
And
that's the truth. So
yeah,
it seems like that um, to take in other people's viewpoints, to find common ground versus just, my mind's made up, don't confuse me with the facts kind of an approach, requires a lot more effort. Do you think it's the effort required that is challenging people or something else?
I think there's a lack maybe of faith in one's own views. I mean, why would we not listen to others if we're not confident in our own perspectives? When we really listen to somebody else, it doesn't matter in the slightest if we change our own perspective or not, but when we genuinely listen to why others are coming at things so differently, when we listen to not uh, to their story, why they're coming from where they're coming from, that's transformative. Just that act, that gift of empathic listening. Um, Sometimes colleges will teach a module on something like this within the context of a course on debate or rhetoric or persuasion. But I think that we need college courses and elsewhere, much younger in life.
Yeah, how about grade school?
About grades, I know.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you think possibly people are really identified with their views versus who they really are, and that's the challenge?
I wish I could tell you. I don't know, but I know that a open society lives and breathes on open hearts and open minds. And I also know, as someone with dual Greek citizenship and studying, the West's first democracy in ancient Athens, that open societies to date tend to have a point of stasis. They have ascent and then stasis and then decline. It's been a pattern that's repeated itself. And so when I see these same pernicious patterns of siloing ourselves, of damaging kinds of tribalism occurring in my own beloved democracy in the United States, well, it's time to stand up and be counted. But it's also, I think that we're not learning our history. We're not learning how to see the kinds of patterns that might make us want to be the change that we would like to see in the world at large. But we have to accept individual responsibility. We have to have some smidgen, at least, of social conscience. We have to quit blaming others for the travails that are besetting us.
What do you mean by open society?
Well, an open society to me is one that in which the citizenry willingly considers alternatives, perspectives to their own. Now, and in doing so, you may well discover that you have what I would call uncommon common ground. But it takes a lot of courage, or what some might call chutzpah, to do that, to really and truly open yourself up as an act of courage. It's an act of faith. You are going to encounter inauthentic people. You are going to encounter people with views that are absolutely abhorrent. You are going to, but you may have a more expansive set of limits and boundaries once you really embark on that journey of entertaining a wider variety of perspectives, not vetting everybody from the outside. outset to make sure they think already the exact same way you do. I mean, we have another election coming up in 5 days, and today's Halloween. So, let's not get so spooked in the wrong way. Let's be a little scared in a good way, so that we'll step up and try to be that change. Try to represent and model openness as much as we can.
So are there any open societies really, or is it just a concept?
Well, I think we're talking about matters of degree. I do believe that societies can be more open than closed. I think, and this always gets me in some hot water, that you can visit countries, as I do regularly, that are closed. People can't even vote. And yet, if you go at the ground level, to the people, I'm a street philosopher, so they are so open-minded and so open-hearted, regular, common, so-called ordinary people who have unbelievably extraordinary perspectives. Sometimes we know we celebrate and ballyhoo our open society in America, but I'm worried it's becoming more and more in a jingoistic way, where we really aren't considering and are open to a diverse plurality of perspectives, so we can really truly understand where we're coming from. I think everything is about story, ultimately, at its foundation. We don't just ask, what is a virtuous person, but we also share what is your story behind how you developed your specific set of virtues. And here's my story, and here's where we differ, diverge, here's where we coalesce. And most of all, we have to it's not just about agreeing to disagree, but agree to engage with one another. As soon as we do, then we're building a bridge. No matter how different, no matter one person's service may be to get out there and be very uh, pro
Well,
abortion.
Christopher, it's
Yes.
it's time for us to take a station break. Christopher and I will return very shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
One people, one nation, searching through the night. One people, one nation, searching for the light. One people, one nation, coming from the stars. One people, one nation, to heal this earth of ours. The end has come, the night has fallen. I have reached the
Are things truly ever either good or bad? With us this hour discussing the transmutation of hurt, betrayal, grief, and loss is Christopher Phelps, the author of Soul of Goodness. Christopher, you speak a lot about goodness. How about you define it for us? What do you mean by goodness?
I think goodness is attempting to act in the world in ways that elevate everyone at one and the same time. Now that's a tall order, but if we're not cognizant of how our actions impact others, then I believe that we're bereft of something very important. The I wish I could tell you that all the time I act in the world in that way, but I don't. I think that since I became a dad rather late in life, I feel more and more the pain and suffering of children everywhere, because I worry about the world that they're growing up in. I worried about becoming a parent, in the first place. Like, well, my wife and I discussed it, Ceci and I. What kind of world is this? And I said, you know what? We're going to make it a world that's more and more heart shaped.
Yeah, I heard someone say one time, well, again, when the discussion comes up of, do I really want to have children and bring them into this mess? But the counter to that was, if good people don't have children to be good people for the next generation, then what happens?
Yeah. So, I've held dialogues with tens of thousands of children around the globe. Many people, for very legitimate reasons, don't have children. But in my case, in the case of me and my wife Ceci, who I met at a Socrates cafe, we've been together 28 years now. We believe that it was best for us. We're very glad and grateful to have children. But I do believe that we have to want, as parents, all children around the world to have greater rights to self determination, to enter a world in which they have opportunities not just to achieve great things in life, but to discover and develop those tools so they really make their unique path.
But the school systems are designed around the tests now, rather than the children. What do you see needs to happen there to enable our children to be creative and to be the blessing in the future rather than more of the polarization?
I think that we have to recognize that there's many other avenues and outlets outside this typical school day where children can engage one another in creative ways. We have these philosophers clubs um, that have been ongoing around the world now for many moons that are led and driven by children and youth. The I learn more in my inquiries from young hearts and minds than I do from anybody because they still think in a dazzling array of colors and nuance, not in black and white and gray. We do have many of these gatherings within schools, typically during lunchtime or after school. But how are we going to change? I don't think you can really change the educational industrial complex. That always gets me hot water when I say that. From within, I think we do have to look for other alternatives and other approaches. There are laboratory schools. They do have to meet lots of sometimes really inane mandates that are down by unimaginative people who run the state education system. We have to take things where they are, but we don't have to accept that's where they have to be. And so we have to have a little bit of a revolutionary sensibility in everything, in formal education and philanthropy and higher education, in the political system, for heaven's sakes. But we have to have that spirit of '76, talking about spirits. Our founding fathers and mothers, they risked their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honors. The wealthiest were willing to do that. It's time for us to step up and do the same and have that spirit welling within us.
When changing gears just a little bit, what do you see as damage and unhealed woundedness? How much of a part does that play in our overall inability to quit pointing the finger and or see other people's viewpoints?
Yeah, I deal with damage and woundedness personally every day when I think of my beloved father who didn't have an opportunity to say his goodbyes, who was in the company of some with the earmarks of psychopaths. Uh, it's a damage and a wound that every day I make an effort to work my way through. The only way I can do that is not, to be besotted with boo-hoo-hoo, but to say, well, what can I do today? I never had the opportunity to say my goodbyes to my dad because of those with him. But what can I do today to say hello to my dad? What can I do to say hello to my yaya, my grandmother, that will make them pleased and proud? Because my dad was all about, Chris, you're leaving this incredible legacy. And sometimes I do get dispirited. Every day is a struggle. One of my favorite philosophers was Robert Coles of Harvard, who wrote this brilliant Children in Crisis series that won Pulitzer Prizes. He goes, you know what? Every day is a struggle. Some days it's all we can do to get out of bed. But we have to because there's others who need us and who need us to contribute our talents, whatever they happen to be. And when he said that, I went to a speech of his. It just resonated with me. This was decades ago, before I started anything. And he actually wrote a blurb for my first book. And when I wrote to him, sort of a fan type letter to tell him how much he had changed my own life. And I do. I think we have to each and every day somehow seize the day. Some days it's going to be more challenging than others. I don't know if we ever really get through totally. I don't know if we'd ever want to get through totally the most egregious hurts and losses, but to channel them and harness spirits and enable us to do positive, good things to create a greater world of goodness that's more in the form and shape of a heart is the perennial challenge, and will forever be so in my mortal moment and beyond.
So which brings us to, is it possible to find goodness in evil? And if so, how do you do it?
Yeah, it's an open question, and I'm not sure that it is always possible. If we look, I mean, we somehow managed to get through the atrocities of Hitler. But it's really important to understand, people point the finger at one figurehead. It was all the ordinary people that were his enablers. What I speak out about more and more is the culture of silence, of people who look the other way, while tens and tens and tens of thousands of innocents are caught in the crosshairs of conflicts that are not of their making, who their lives forevermore shattered. Those are the ones that make me feel it incumbent to stand up and speak out for them. It's more important than ever, because I'm worried. Talk about darkness. To me, darkness is equivalent to silence, to looking the other way. And goodness is those, come what may, who stand up and speak out when they know that they have to. And sometimes it does not meet individually with great outcomes, but they do so nonetheless.
Can a person focus on the good in all things without going into denial? Because the silence and the denial is places you don't look. So can you focus on the good in all things, and at the same time be able to look around you and see what's going on?
Yeah, I don't. That would be a really tall order. I think that you almost have to maybe be put on some sorts of blinders in order to channel your actions. That's not to say that, because if we try to do things willy nilly and pell mell, we may be diluting our energies and efforts in ways that we can't, that we don't make the kind of impact we would otherwise. For me, my thing is, our Socrates Cafe, Cafe for Shakespeare, Democracy Cafe activities. It's not a cure all, but there's all these other gazillions of wonderful souls who are also fighting that good fight with steeped in social conscience in their little patch of the earth. And we cross, there's overlap. And so if I felt like all the burden was on me, it would just be overwhelming and I would never be able to act. But there's so many others also really trying to be the change too. I know
So
that.
so how do you know what's yours to do? What deserves your zeal? I mean, Lord knows there's plenty of projects out there that really have a lot of need and a lot of people suffering if that need isn't met. So how does an individual know what is theirs to do?
I think it takes continual inquiry, self reflection. I know that in the era that I started Socrates Cafe in 1996, I had to ask myself and really reflect, well, what modest talents does Christopher Phillips have that can kind of push back against this deepening polarization among Americans, starting with Americans, but not ending there. And for me, I hark back to the teachings of my yaya that have just been lying there dormant for decades. And so I realized, you know what? I'm going to be a philosopher in the trenches, a street philosopher, sort of the Johnny Appleseed philosophy. And I'm going to bring together people and have them engage in questions that are as timely as they are timeless. And let's see if they can rise to their higher angels and discover areas of commonality that they might not think that they could. Let's see if they can even listen to one another, for heaven's sakes. And lo and behold, despite so many naysayers when I shared my idea with them, they said, Americans are no longer inured to hearing one another out. And I said, well, let's see. Let's see, because if you're right, then the handwriting's on the wall, and there's the darkness, my old friend or enemy. And so I started, and it to this day, 28 years later, it still has a momentum. It's deepened and expanded around the globe. And I think that people realize that they're more than capable of hearing one another out, of supporting their views more than they would in a typical conversation, and of having their views scrutinized, having the courage to have their convictions challenged, and that it can be a very heady and uplifting and transformative experience.
It's an avenue for personal growth for sure, isn't it?
Yes, and again, I don't see any neat divides between personal growth and societal growth. If I'm, personal growth can be really narcissistic if we live too siloed, or it can be, if it's imbued or tinged with social conscience, it can be a growth that almost invariably resonates with others, whether it's just in our immediate circle or elsewhere. But they'll see that maybe there's more of a bounce to our step, a light in our eyes, and that we're impacting others, and they embark on their own journey to go, well, how can I find my own unique path to do that too?
It's finding one's unique path is a challenge in a world that tries to make everybody the same.
It
So,
is.
yeah, it's again, it's about that time for us to take a station break. Christopher and I will be right back to continue our discussion. So please stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
I've been broken, shattered, cast to the wind. I am scattered upon the wind. I've been broken, shattered, cast to the wind. I am scattered upon the wind. I've been broken, shattered, cast to the wind.
How can you love what hurts you? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing the alchemy of love and compassion is Christopher Phillips. His website, christopherphillips.com. Christopher, how does one transform hurt, betrayal, grief, and loss into love and compassion?
I think it takes an incredible journey, and it's going to be different for each and every soul. The honestly, in my case, it was my journey was also taking on my shoulders those who didn't make it, who couldn't overcome their own hurts and losses, including, as I mentioned in my writings, a student of mine who took her life. And I wasn't there the night that she did so, and she tried to reach me. These were the days before cell phones, and so I am haunted that I wasn't there to reach out for her that dark, dark, dark night. And so she is one of the reasons that gives me strength and resolve to do what I can. So I never reach that nadir of despair that she did. You know, she was my student when I was a middle school teacher, and we stayed in touch all the many years since. And then she suffered unspeakably some things, and so she's with me. She's with me now and always. As are some friends of mine from high school who also met with the same, tragic outcome. They just couldn't see their way through. And I think there's many of us who will not not forgive ourselves, but will always lament that we weren't there. But use that as a spur and a platform to make sure that we have we have an empathy and sympathy and try to be there for those in our circle and beyond who are in those dark places, including ourselves, quite honestly. It's sometimes we need help too, and we need to have the courage to reach out and seek help.
Many people speak of love, and you've been saying, love is the answer, if you will. But would you please define love as it applies to transformation?
hmm there in the way I learned it from a yaya, and I as I write in Socrates and Love, we Greeks have five types of love, if not six. And so one of them is, communal love, philia. One is romantic love, eros. One is family love, storge. One is philia, which is friendship and communal love. And one is agape, unconditional love. And so love with no strings attached. And so we have to kind of try to harness all of those, I believe, and in ways that connect us more with our families, with ourselves, and with our societies at one and the same time. The one type of love that I'm most fascinated by that was practiced by the Greeks of old is called xenia, Xenia, love of stranger.
Hmm.
In the days of Greeks of old, they traveled on foot mostly. And so when they couldn't go any further, they would just knock on a stranger's door and seek shelter and food for that night. And people would open up their doors and give it to them. And go ahead.
Um, as you're speaking, it's just fascinating to me, all these different names for different kinds of love. It occurs to me that our society is confused about love because we don't have those concepts. Would you speak to that a little, please?
Well, if we practice what this Greek form called xenia, love of stranger, love of the other, I think we might open the borders of our hearts a little bit more, and maybe that might induce us to maybe be want to put out more of a welcome mat to those who are fleeing their communities because of unspeakable violence that they face, and they're just seeking a safe space for their family. So it was what the great Enlightenment philosopher Immanuel Kant would call universal hospitality. And I am making it my mission right now to spread the word about this notion of universal hospitality, because I believe that when leaders launch into conflicts in which innocents have no escape route, their families' lives shattered, that is the antithesis of love in all of its forms. I believe that if we practice that form of universal hospitality where we had to find places for them to go, as many societies right now are opening up their doors to those in Ukraine, to those in Gaza, those who are seeking shelter away from the madness of the conflicts. Agree or disagree with any of the conflicts that you want. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we have to find shelters and open our doors and put out our welcoming mats for those who are trying to escape unspeakable violence, whether it's in Central America or in the Middle East, and they have no control over their lives. They wanted to bring their families into the world. It's the same reason I did, but they have their lives are very bleak right now. What would the world be like if we practice this notion of universal hospitality, love of so-called stranger, and opening up our doors to them at a time of dire need?
And on the other side of that coin, there's a lot of social problems that are arising from massive influx of um, not just refugees. I really hear you what you're saying there, but people that just want to come over here and improve their lives and live off the system. Quite frankly, how can you tell the difference between aiding and enabling, and how can we draw that line so that our society doesn't suffer as a result of having too much of an open door policy?
Well, I think that there's always going to be so-called bad eggs. I don't think there's any perfect solution, but I think you have to look at whether our policy is doing more good than harm. Let's say 99% come in to our country or other countries that are fairly open societies and do great good, but there's 1% that get sensationalized who do great awful things. My grandparents came through Ellis Island to escape Mussolini's minions in the days of rising fascism. And just after they got here, Congress passed a law. It was a nativist majority that prohibited further Southern Greeks and Italians from coming to America. And by Southern Greeks and Italians, you might as well just say poor, because these were some of just as when there were a great number of Irish who immigrated who were very, very poor. So I think we have to be careful. I think we can't look for absolute solutions or remedies. There's always, but I also think we have to hark back that America, it's not just a cliche, is the land of immigrants. And so many of us tend to forget from whence we came and what our origins and ethos are.
It's a difficult problem. I don't think there's any easy solution. I can certainly see both sides. So, how does compassion play into transformation?
Yeah, I think that this notion, that some might call it a Christian notion of there but for the grace of God go I. So many of us, by the mere accident of birth, are born into the harshest possible circumstances, already have two strikes and they've just entered the world. How can we do our bit regardless of our notions or desires about immigration within our own country, to make sure that they don't have to flee their own neck of the woods so that they can live in hopeful circumstances right where they are. So many, because then we get into more nuanced things where how does U.S. policy contribute to much of the violence around the world? How does what Eisenhower spoke of the military-industrial complex contribute to it? How does U.S. policy, when it comes to drugs, affect these things? These take very deep and nuanced looks and on a continual basis so that people don't have to flee, so that it becomes almost a moot point about people having to try to find a new life in other countries.
And I think most people would just as soon stay home. I mean, let's face it, fleeing everything is not an easy choice or an
Not
easy
It's
process.
terrifying and painful. My yaya, my grandmother Calliope, she missed her little island in Greece in the South Aegean, Nisyros, every day of her life.
Hmm.
She missed it terribly, but there was no hope there. I mean, the fascists had taken over. She couldn't even teach Greek in her school. She was a teacher.
Mm.
She had to leave. It was terrifying. It was a time of terror. And so she came to the United States, and what did she do? Even though she didn't like it that much, she became the first teacher of Greek language and culture in the Tampa Bay region of Florida after they settled there. And she threw herself into it with everything she had. And I don't know. Look at me. I'm the byproduct of that.
So, how do you find balance between being compassionate and open hearted and open door policy, and at the same time, being realistic and being protected and not being vulnerable to the shadow sides of people?
Yeah, I don't know that you ever do. I think that I certainly, because I do tend to find the good in people and praise it, I know that to this day I suffer from people taking advantage of me and me and my wife at times, and so I try to have a more weather eye towards these things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Of course, as a result of these things, I try to be very, very, very protective of my children. But there's no cure-all. I mean, you have to be at least somewhat vulnerable. You may get hurt, you may get burned, and I certainly have many times. But there's so many people of goodwill and good faith out there as well. I do believe that they're the shining bright stars to this day. Even Anne Frank, when she was in hiding for years and her family was betrayed in the end, she would look out into the sky and say, I just can't help but think that people of goodwill are going to make sure that there's going to be a better day. Even she, in all the darkness that she suffered, felt that way till the very end.
It's so easy to either shut down your heart and avoid people and avoid compassion to prevent being hurt, or turn a blind eye to people's patterns, love them for their potential, and get blindsided by their patterns. It's quite a dance, isn't it?
It's quite a dance. I love that you mentioned that word dance because my wife says he was a dancer with the Martha Graham School before we met and married. And I think that there's a dance to any kind of inquiry. You know,
Absolutely.
There's a
Well,
quote.
it's that time again. We're going to have to take another commercial break. Please stay tuned with us as Christopher and I continue to explore radical transformation. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
One people, one nation, searching through the night. One people, one. Brilliant feathers of an unearthly hue glide by on the edge of his dream. touch an unheard sound.
Are you transformed or just pretending? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Christopher Phillips. His website, christopherphillips.com. Christopher, how can we distinguish genuine transformation from a superficial one?
That's a very good question. And I'm not sure that we always can. I'm sorry, you're talking to a philosopher. There's no yes or no's with me, I know. But some people say, my actions will speak louder than words for here on out. And then you believe them and you give them a second, third, 10th, 15th chance and they do it to you again. It's like Lucy holding up the football for Charlie Brown. Every single time she yanks it at the final minute, and yet he still finally gives in. I love Charlie Brown. I think I'm a little bit like Charlie Brown.
There's a little Charlie Brown in all of us, I believe.
And there's some people you just, my precious father, you just can't give up on certain people. And it led to his tragic passing. I admire him and love him even more for that. I mean, Shakespeare wrote about these tragic figures. He knew that probably most of us, I can never universalize when it speaks to human beings, but he knew many of us had darker sides and elements and impulses. So he wasn't surprised by the endless hurts and betrayals, even as he celebrated the goodness of so many people like Cordelia and King Lear, who met with a tragic end, yet had that goodness of heart till the very end of her last breath.
So what roles does communication play in transformation?
I think it plays, it's everything. And then we have to ask, well, what do we mean by communication? Communication doesn't have to be through words. It can be through gestures, through acts of kindness, through listening, which is the most greatest gift you can give any other human being, is to genuinely listen to them. But I think, there's a lot of books, like on the very popular book on nonviolent communication. But I think sometimes when we do present alternative perspectives, ways of doing and seeing, it can, in the best sense, do violence to people's traditional ways of looking at things and push them out of narrow parameters. It's so difficult and so challenging sometimes to have those difficult conversations. And because it forces us at the same time to look within ourselves and ask ourselves, do I have some of these tendencies and impulses as well? And if so, am I dealing with them or even recognizing them? It's a many directional road, true communication. I think having these public dialogues, I'm always having internal inquiries at one and the same time. And I think most of my family can attest to that. It makes me a better husband and father.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed, particularly lately, about communication, where so much of our communication happens through text or through emails or through, the written word as well as the spoken word, and because the world has become so complex, I can get an email or a text from somebody and read it 3 or 4 times and get 3 or 4 different takes on it. Or I can even hear the spoken word. And at first I think, well, they mean this or they mean that. And if I sit with it long enough, I'll realize, oh, no, that's what I'm afraid they mean, but that's probably not where they're coming from.
That's a
Have you
very
seen
good point.
have you
I,
seen an increase in this?
Yeah, I find that communication by means like WhatsApp and such, it's a tricky thing. That's why I always insist that when I do a Socrates Cafe or Socrates Cafe dialogue, that we see each other. We have to see each other. It's not enough.
You mean like in person?
It has to be on Zoom
Oh, okay.
or Microsoft Teams. Have many global gatherings and bring in people from everywhere. But we have to see each other. I tell people, you got to turn your video on, even if you don't like it. Otherwise, it's all too easy to hide behind words.
Or to just not understand them when you aren't getting all the other physical cues.
I mean, people call Twitter or X or whatever you want the public marketplace. Give me a break. If it is, it's of insults because people can hide behind their computer screens. Yeah, people are much less likely in most cases to be so put down and salty after engaging with one another face to face. There will always still be some. There will be some who are just will try to push other people's buttons. But in my experience, after 28 years of holding just thousands upon thousands of dialogues, if we're going to build these bridges, these intentional bridges between one human soul and another, we got to see each other. We got to see our inflections, not just hear our gestures, not just hear them. And we have to be able to see each other face to face. Have to somehow.
That's one of the great gifts of the internet, and one of the limitations too is we can see people face to face if we're using something with video, which is helpful. But at the same
Yeah,
time, so much of our
except
communications aren't that way.
right. I mean, there's people who are blind, physically blind. They have blindness. So obviously, I'm not going to insist that they, but so we have to find ways to communicate in which we can sort of what the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said of Socrates, that he managed to get people to delve into their own souls and to enable us better to look into one another's hearts. There's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be limitations, but to me, it's all about the heartfelt attempt. These are habits of inquiry, habits of genuine empathic listening. These aren't one-off shows. These are things that you have to continually do over the course of your lifetime. That's why I don't do a Chris Phillips show. I go to places and establish groups where they can cultivate these habits as well.
So it's that time in the show, Christopher, when I get to ask you, what's your mission?
My mission in life is to become a better person. And the way that I do that is to try to learn a little bit more about people's stories each and every day. The guy that sells me tacos at a taco stand, I might go there 1,000 times. And I'll finally say, you know what? We've been interacting forever and a day, and I've never just asked you, tell me a bit about yourself. And that in itself is transformative. Wow, this guy really wants to know a little bit about me. So for me, my mission is to unearth people's stories. That's it, to become storytellers.
Hmm. Storytelling has been so important throughout the ages, and I can certainly see why. If so many times it seems like we get caught up in the expediency of our day-to-day business. Like I was on the phone today with a lady from the bank. We're going through all sorts of stuff with that
Mhm.
particular branch. And she'd been under a lot of pressure and going through her stuff. And I could tell, I mean, just from what's going on. And I asked her, I said, well, how are you holding up with all this? And we don't know each other. And she said to me, you're the first person
Mm.
that's ever asked me that in my career here. Okay. And I thought, oh, that is so sad. How much of we ourselves and each other do we lose in expediency and professionalism?
Well, ours is a world of hurly-burly, fast-paced capitalism. But you slowed things down beautifully by doing that. You gave her such a gift. And so you showed that it is possible by your example. And I dare say now, the person with whom you interacted will likely do the same with someone else. I have a friend from high school who graduated, almost 50 years ago, who's going through so much. He said, Chris, you're the only person who just writes me and says, how are you doing? Uh, and he's just so moved and touched by that simple act. How you doing? It's not, some people ask it and then you can tell as soon as you start answering that they're not even listening to you.
They ask because it's
Yeah,
politically correct, right?
right, or something.
Mhm.
And that, but you really have to ask it in ways that you're ready to listen if they want to tell you how they're doing. And not because they're looking to you as their forever crutch or anything like that, but you ask the question, and God bless you for doing so. But now, be there to answer, let as they answer it for you.
There's a lovely symbol that I saw one time, and it's a heart with ears on it. And that really kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
I think so. That's so beautiful. I think that the ethos of heartfelt listening, of heartfelt inquiry, of asking questions out of curiosity rather than stump the person is so important right now. And this is a tradition that I'm doing my utmost in my modest way to try to resuscitate. And I believe it's what the world needs now.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. So, Christopher, what legacy do you hope to leave behind?
I mean, if I run out tomorrow or run out in the street, I get run over by a Mack truck or whatever, I would. I said that when I held my first Socrates Cafe in 1996, and I saw that people could rise to what I call their higher angels. I thought, you know what? If I die right now, it's okay because I found my thing and I did my thing. And odds are that people will continue to carry the torch, whether I'm here tomorrow or not. And so that's how I kind of look at things.
It's a good way to look at it that, we have to pay attention to every moment, really, don't we? Because this might be our last to have an opportunity.
We do, and not in a morbid way. I think it can be sort of uplifting. We most of us do not know when our time is up. Most of my uncles and aunts died, very unexpectedly of strokes, heart attacks, and such, or in one, or fighting in a war not of their making. And so, to be cognizant of that can ideally inspire us to really seize the day as we otherwise might not.
Seizing the day, seizing the moment. That's what creates a life, isn't it?
I truly believe so.
Well, it is that magic moment, and we are out of time. Christopher, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Gwilda. Appreciate it so much.
Our guest this hour has been the author of Soul of Goodness, Christopher Phillips. To find out more about Christopher, where you can find his book and all he has to offer, visit his website, ChristopherPhillips.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please, be sure to join me right here next time as this mission continues, bringing information, resources, and support to our rapidly evolving world.
One people, one nation, coming from the stars. One people, one nation.